They whisper like flowers with the teeth in their grin. I shrink myself down, try to quiet the din. One wrong word and the chord is in session in Wonderland. Every glance is a question. I wear my guilt like a velvet crown. Ashamed before I even break down. Hyper aware, yet I still fall apart. Every stare feels like a dart to the heart. Welcome to Wonderland, unlocked, with Courtney guiding through every thought. Borderline in Wonderland, this is the place where shame wears a smile and hides its face. But here we name it, we speak what's true. No judgment can undo the real.
Every day we tumble a little deeper, not to lose ourselves, but to find the parts we hid. This is Wonderland Unlocked. I'm your host, Courtney, and today we're going to dive into a feeling that's far too common and far too misunderstood: loneliness. But not just any loneliness. We're talking about the kind you feel when you're surrounded by people. It's the loneliness in crowds, the kind that creeps in when you're in a room full of faces, but can't seem to connect with anyone. We've all been there. It's a strange thing, right? You're physically surrounded by others, but emotionally, you feel like you're a million miles away. This loneliness often gets lost in translation, because how can you feel alone when you're not actually alone? Isn't that the paradox of human connection? How can you feel invisible even in the middle of a bustling world? Today, we'll talk about why that happens, how loneliness in a crowd manifests, and how we can start to heal from it. Because no one should feel like the empty teacup at the table, not when we can fill our cups with something better. And in those moments, the world feels like a blur. Conversations can feel distant, like you're hearing them through water, unable to fully dive into the current. You can see the laughter and smiles, but somehow they're out of reach. It's as though you're floating just outside of everything, like a ghost in your own life. What's happening here is not a simple case of not fitting in. It's a deeper kind of isolation. You might be physically present in the room, but emotionally you're miles away. It's that uncomfortable feeling of being stuck in the middle, between wanting to be seen and heard, but not knowing how to make that happen. The ideal of emotional isolation goes beyond just the feeling of being unnoticed. It's more than simply being around people, but still feeling alone. It's a form of disconnect that feels like a personal failure. We begin questioning our worth, thinking, if they don't see me, is there something wrong with me? Am I not worthy of being part of this? And that's when it gets even more complicated. For those of us living with emotional sensitivities or conditions like BPD, borderline personality disorder, that loneliness can quickly evolve into something much more intense. It isn't just about feeling left out. It's about feeling as though there's something inherently wrong with us for needing connection in the first place. It becomes a cycle, fearing that we'll never be able to connect and fearing that if we don't connect, we'll be abandoned. We can feel like a paradox ourselves, in an intricate web of wanting intimacy, but being terrified of it at the same time. That fear only deepens when we start to believe we're not good enough or that we've already missed our chance to belong. This disconnect is also complicated by the fact that on the surface, things appear fine. We're at the party, at the dinner, in the meeting. Everything looks like it should feel right. But inside, it's as if the connection wire is broken. We're not tapping into the pulse of the group. Instead, we're stuck in our own head, questioning why we can't reach out or why the people around us don't seem to see the real us. And that's where the frustration builds, the inability to reach others, even when we're surrounded by them. That's the moment when you start wondering if it's you, if you're broken, if you're the problem. But here's the truth. You're not the problem. The problem is the way we're taught to connect with others. We're taught that being surrounded by people automatically means that we're not alone, that proximity equals connection. But that's not always the case, especially when we're longing for something deeper, something authentic. When we fail to connect in these situations, it often feels like a personal failure, as if we missed some social cue or didn't say the right thing. But the reality is, it's not about the perfect conversation or fitting into a particular mold. It's about creating spaces where we can be genuinely seen and heard, without fear of judgment or abandonment. But the challenge, then, is how to reconcile the physical presence of people with the emotional absence we feel. How do we get past that feeling of being invisible when everyone else seems to be so seen? For many of us, it comes down to vulnerability. We want to be seen, but we're terrified of showing too much. We put on our Cheshire smile. We act like everything is fine, even when we feel like we're drowning in silence. But this is the trick. The more we try to mask the loneliness, the more it amplifies the disconnect. We end up feeling even more isolated because no one gets to see the real us. The loneliness in crowds is an invitation to explore this deeper need for connection. It's a call to look beyond the surface level interactions and reach for the conversations that nourish us, to ask ourselves, who am I allowing into my space? Who makes me feel like I belong, not just in their presence, but in their heart? And in this journey, it's important to remember that we don't need to connect with everyone. We just need to connect with the right people, the ones who see us not as a shadow, but as a full presence in the room. The first thing we need to acknowledge is that what we're feeling is real, that it's not just a fleeting moment of discomfort. It's a deep-seated emotion that's been building, perhaps longer than we realize. This invisible pain is not something we can simply shake off. It doesn't just go away because we're surrounded by people or because we're told we should be happy in a social setting. When you're struggling with emotional dysregulation, it's as if your internal compass is spinning wildly, trying to figure out where you belong in the sea of faces. The desire for connection becomes overwhelming. But instead of feeling comforted by people around us, we're left grasping for something that's not there. We may try to force ourselves into conversations to smile through the discomfort, but deep down, we know that the connection we crave is missing. It's like we're trying to flip a cup with water that just keeps slipping through the cracks. This is where the isolation grows even more complex. The more we crave connection, the more we're unable to find it. The more our sense of worth starts to erode. We begin to question ourselves. Why can't I be like everyone else? Why can't I just connect the way others do? But the truth is, these feelings don't define who we are. They don't make us broken. It's a reminder that our needs for emotional intimacy, for connection, and for understanding are valid. The loneliness we feel isn't a reflection of our inability to belong. It's a reflection of how society often prioritizes shallow interaction over deep, meaningful connection. We're taught to believe that if we're not constantly participating in the social script, the small talk, the easy friendships, the surface-level exchanges, we're doing something wrong. But that's not the case. The desire for something deeper isn't a flaw. It's a sign of emotional depth. So how do we start to cope with this kind of isolation? First, let's talk about reframing the way we think about loneliness. It's not a weakness, and it doesn't make us unworthy. We can begin by giving ourselves permission to experience that loneliness, to sit with it, and to acknowledge that it's telling us something important about our need for connection. Next, we need to start looking for moments of connection that feel authentic. It's not about filling every gap with noise or trying to force ourselves into a situation where we don't feel comfortable. It's about finding the pockets of genuine interaction that exist in the world around us. Maybe it's with a close friend, someone who truly listens, or even with ourselves through activities that make us feel grounded. Journaling, meditation, or even creative expression. These can all be ways to create moments of connection with our inner selves, to remind us that we are worthy of connection even when the external world doesn't provide it. Another way to cope is by reaching out for support. While it can feel intimidating to make ourselves vulnerable, sharing our experiences with someone who understands can be incredibly healing. Whether it's a therapist, a support group, or even a trusted friend, finding people who get it can make all the difference. You're not alone in feeling this way, even though it may feel like it sometimes. And remember, connecting with others doesn't always mean a large social gathering or endless conversations. Sometimes it's the smallest moments, the brief glance that acknowledges you, the silent support of a shared experience, or the presence of someone who doesn't need you to explain everything, but is just simply with you. Those moments of connection can be just as powerful as any deep conversation. In the end, the invisible pain of loneliness in crowds isn't something that can always be solved in a single moment. It's a process of learning to recognize your needs, validating your experiences, and reaching out for the connection you deserve. This loneliness is not a flaw. It's an invitation to understand yourself more deeply and to find the people who can see you for who you truly are. But let's take it a step further. How do we start to reframe the narrative that the absence of deep connection means there's something wrong with us? The key is self-compassion. When we feel overlooked or disconnected, it's easy to spiral into self-criticism, wondering if we're not worthy of real relationships. We might even think, if I were more charismatic, more engaging, more likable, then maybe I wouldn't feel this way. But this is a dangerous loop, and it's not an accurate reflection of reality. Here's the truth. The world is full of people who are struggling with their own versions of this loneliness. What if the very people we long to connect with are also feeling unseen, unheard, or misunderstood in their own ways? This mutual isolation is part of the human experience. We all crave connection, but sometimes we're too caught up in our own stories to see the pain in others. Self-validation, then, is not just about telling ourselves that we are worthy of connection. It's about recognizing that our needs are valid. We might feel like we're standing in the corner of a crowded room, hoping someone will notice us. But the reality is that validation starts with us. We need to remind ourselves that our feelings, our loneliness, our need for authentic relationships, our desire to be seen, are not weaknesses. They are signals that we are deeply human. Let's also acknowledge the role of societal expectations in this. We live in a world that prizes efficiency, visibility, and surface-level interactions. The hustle of social media, the pressure of performing in groups, and the expectation that we should always be available or entertaining can make it even harder to connect on a meaningful level. In these settings, it's easy to feel invisible. But the truth is, true connection doesn't thrive on constant visibility or noise. It thrives on honesty, vulnerability, and presence. So how can we create a meaningful connection in this world that often values quantity over quality? Start small. Look for opportunities to connect in quieter, more intentional ways. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room or the center of attention. Sometimes, the best connections happen in the quietest spaces, over a shared glance, a passing smile, or a thoughtful comment. You might find that there are people around you who are also craving a deeper connection. And all it takes is one small moment to acknowledge that shared experience. If you're struggling to find those moments in crowds, it might help to intentionally seek spaces where connection can happen more naturally. Seek out environments that promote deep conversation, where the focus isn't on performing or feeling silence, but rather on being present with one another. This could be a support group, a hobby group, or even just a quiet coffee date with a friend. These moments might feel more rare, but they can be more nourishing than 1,000 surface-level exchanges. Another way to begin healing the empty teacup is through creative expression. Art, music, writing. These are all powerful tools for reconnecting with ourselves and expressing emotions that words alone might not capture. Creativity has the unique ability to bridge the gap between what we feel and what we can share with the world. Whether it's through painting, poetry, or music, the act of creating allows us to express our inner selves and remind ourselves that we have something valuable to offer. But what if we're not quite ready to put ourselves out there, even in small ways? That's okay too. Healing isn't a race. It's about creating spaces where we can take a step back and reflect on what we really need. You might not be able to connect with others right now, but that doesn't mean you're not making progress. Just by acknowledging your feelings, just by sitting with the loneliness, you're already taking the first steps towards healing. And in this space of self-reflection, don't forget that part of healing is also recognizing your own value. Your presence in the world matters, regardless of how many people notice or how many times you feel overlooked. Your uniqueness, your story, and your perspective are valuable. You are not defined by the times you felt invisible. You are defined by the love you are capable of giving and the strength you hold, even when you feel weak. Take time to remind yourself of this. Keep a journal where you record moments of self-recognition, small victories, personal reflections, or even just the simple fact that you're showing up for yourself in these difficult moments. As we move forward, we'll explore more about how to start rebuilding a sense of reconnectedness from the inside out, creating not only the potential for connection with others, but also a deeper, more fulfilling connection with ourselves. Remember, the teacup is not a permanent state. It's simply a reminder that while we may sometimes feel empty, we're also capable of being filled with self-love, understanding, and the connection that truly matters. Now, let's dive deeper into how to heal from this loneliness by actively creating those meaningful connections that we need so badly. It's essential to realize that while loneliness can sometimes feel like a silent wall, it's also an invitation for action. When we feel isolated in a crowd, it's easy to believe that everyone else has it together, that they have the perfect connections, and we're the only ones left out. But here's the truth. Many of us in those crowds are feeling the same way. Everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be heard. This is why reaching out is so important. Yes, it does require vulnerability, and that can be scary. But it's through vulnerability that true connections are formed. And you don't have to wait for someone else to make the first move. You can create those connections by simply taking the first step, whether that's striking up a conversation with a colleague, inviting someone for coffee, or even joining a group or community that shares your interests. But, and this is crucial, you have to do it in a way that feels genuine to you. Don't perform. Don't change who you are in order to fit in. Authenticity is magnetic, and when you reach out in a way that feels true to yourself, you'll start to attract people who resonate with you at a deeper level. Now, reaching out is just one part of the equation. It's also about how you maintain the connections that you start to form. Part of healing from loneliness in crowds is recognizing that not always about quantity, it's about quality. 1 or 2 genuine relationships are far more valuable than a room full of shallow interactions. And this is where setting boundaries becomes so important. Boundaries are not about shutting people out, they are about protecting yourself from situations and relationships that drain you. In crowded spaces, you might find yourself overwhelmed by noise, conversation, or social expectations. And that's okay. It's important to recognize when you need to step back, take a break, and recharge. This is an act of self-care, not selfishness. If something doesn't feel right, whether it's a social situation, a person, or even an energy of a particular crowd, give yourself permission to leave. Protect your peace, protect your energy, and don't feel guilty for doing so. Remember, it's not about avoiding connection altogether. It's about finding and nurturing the connections that make you feel alive, heard, and understood. It's important to note that self-compassion plays a huge role in this process. The idea of reaching out or stepping back may feel difficult, but be kind to yourself in this journey. If you find yourself struggling to connect, or if you experience feelings of rejection, remember that it's not a reflection of your worth. These moments don't define you. In fact, they can serve as reminders of your strength and resilience. As we navigate loneliness in crowds, we need to remember that it's not about fixing the loneliness, but about learning how to sit with it, understand it, and eventually create the connections we seek. Loneliness doesn't just disappear, but we can learn how to manage it and make room for the moments of connection and understanding that we so deeply need. And it's not just about reaching out to others, it's also about building that bridge within ourselves. Sometimes, the loneliness we feel is a reflection of how disconnected we are from our own needs, emotions, and desires. Healing begins with reconnecting to ourselves, our passions, our voices, and our truth. Take a moment to reflect on what truly brings you joy, what fills you up, and how can you invite more of that into your life? Whether it's creative outlets, hobbies, or simply finding time to still be with yourself. This reconnection with your own inner world is essential in healing the loneliness you feel. And as you continue to walk this path of healing, remember, it's okay to take it one step at a time. You don't have to fix everything all at once. Each small effort to reach out, to create a connection, or to care for yourself is a victory. Your journey is uniquely yours, and it's okay if it looks different from others' paths. It's also important to remind ourselves that we don't need to be surrounded by a crowd to be whole. True connections start from within. When we start to love and accept ourselves, we begin to create the space for others to do the same. The bridges we build with others will always be stronger when they start with a solid foundation of self-compassion. So, as you move through the world, remember that you are seen, you are heard, and you are worthy of connection, not just from others, but from yourself. You have everything you need within you to start healing the loneliness piece by piece, one connection at a time. Thank you for joining me today on Wonderland Unlocked. I hope this episode has offered some insight and comfort. You are never truly alone in your experience because you are always with yourself, and that connection is always worth celebrating.